Hello, everyone. So today I decided to talk about puppets, specifically Jim Henson's puppets and the evolution of professional puppetry that was captained by him through the 60s leading up to his death in the 90s. So specifically, oh, my cats are fighting. Specifically in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about the mechanics and engineering behind these puppets and how that has evolved even after the death of Jim Henson, and how puppetry has continued to grow as technological advancements progress. So these are physical breakdowns of how the actors perform inside two of the more complicated Muppets. These are what they consider costume puppets, since the actor and performer is within the puppet. So for Big Bird, he is an 8'2" puppet. So the performer is able to be inside of him, and he uses one hand to control his right hand and the other to control his mouth above his head. However, then that makes you wonder, how does he control the left hand? So not shown in this diagram, you can actually, in the actual costume, see that there is a fishing line that goes from the left hand through the back of the head to the right hand. So when the right hand is moved, the left hand moves with it. And the actor can use that to create like bilateral movement. And so for Snuffleupagus, this is actually a two-person costume. So the voice actor is in the front and he controls Snuffleupagus's mouth and how he talks with his bottom hand. And then for his top hand, he uses it to control his eyes and also the movement of the snout. What's not shown in this diagram is that there is a piece of stiff PVC pipe. Oh my God, my cat is fighting. Sorry, oh my God. What you can't see in that is that there is a PVC pipe in his snout that moves stiffly in like one motion, and it can create the movement for his snout. Both the actors lean either forwards or backwards, depending on where they are, to keep tension on the body of the puppet. And that poor guy in the back is just in charge of the back legs. Okay, so this is from a clip, CBS This Morning at Home with Jim Henson in 1989, where he takes off the back of the head of a Fraggle Rock puppet and shows how the inner mechanics have gotten a lot more complicated as they moved into the 80s and were able to use radio control for these puppets. This is the head of Junior Gorg from Fraggle Rock. His eyes are actually radio controlled. And there is a video camera that pokes through the eyes, and that video camera is linked to a tiny screen in front of the performer. So he's watching his surroundings through a television screen that's right in front of his eyes. So from there, post Jim Henson's death, we move more into modern times. And instead of having multiple performers per puppet, they've started to engineer motors into these costumes that can make it so one actor can do the job of several at once. One of the more simple ways to do that is servos motors. These are really cheap, easy hobby motors that people can use. And they utilize several of them to replace radio control and to minimize the amount of physical performers needed per puppet. All of these next screenshots are from a really amazing like mini doc on YouTube called The Puppets Inside Jim Henson's Creature Shop. This was Adam Savage Tested, I think is the YouTube for that. So yeah, connected to those servos motors are little hand controls that the performers can utilize. So instead of having a full body performance, their performance kind of lies in this little control center. I thought this was a really interesting photo because you can see that wires and mechanics have replaced where hand once was. Some would say it kind of takes the life out of puppetry. I agree in a sense, but I also think it's amazing that these engineers are given the opportunity to work in the world of puppets. And I think it's fascinating what they've been able to do with very simple motor systems. There's a lot of hidden engineering in puppets. I think it's so interesting that there are hundreds and hundreds of hours of work put into these puppets, and then they are faced with fabric or latex and paints, and it simplifies the complex technology that's inside of them. I just think that's so cool. So this was really interesting. This is very new in the world of puppetry. So this is digital puppetry, meaning they have created a character that is purely digital. And he lives within this computer, and they have this whole system rigged up that I'll show you in the next photo, where the actor puts himself in this machine and is able to manipulate the puppet in the digital world. So here's kind of you can kind of zoom out and see that it's a dual-handed system. And it's almost the exact opposite of motion capture, in the sense that instead of taking a physical person and digitizing them, you are using a physical person to control a creature that exists in the digital world. It's very similar to animation in that sense, except there is a physical performer behind it. So the creative supervisor was the guy narrating this video. And he said, "We like to see high degrees of craft, art, if you will." I think that's so interesting that some people wouldn't consider this art. They would consider this purely engineering. However, I think engineering and art go hand in hand, and they cannot exist without the other. So to me, this is art. Both the outside design of the character, like you're seeing now, and the mechanical inside are both incredibly complex works of art. So yeah, here is another, just because a lot of things are digital and a lot of things are being mechanized does not mean that there isn't a ton of typical standard fine art behind this process. Here is a clay sculpture that I believe was going to be cast as a latex facade that you put over a puppet. And in the back there, you can see a movie that I'll talk about in just a little bit, or a puppet from a movie that I'll talk about, Where the Wild Things Are. A lot of people thought that was CGI, but they were actually physical puppets that were mixed with CGI in order to create more fluid, realistic movement. But that's him right behind there. So he was a real puppet the whole time. So again, I feel like a lot of people, when they think of Muppets and they think of puppets, they just imagine foam and fabric and rods. But if you look at this workshop, it is truly a fabrication workshop. It is a place for makers and engineers and mechanics to come in and really experiment and push the boundaries of what they are able to do with their craft. It's a true workshop environment. And here I thought this was a really good kind of encapsulation of how multimedia puppetry is, and how you have to use acrylics and woods and foam, PVC pipes, metals, bolts, everything. You have to use every possible physical material you can think of in incredibly creative ways, and somehow make them look like they all belong together on one cohesive creature. I think that's so cool. So instead of the old sculpting and molding and casting process that they used to do to create these more complex pieces, more organic pieces, a lot of that has been replaced with 3D printing. So you design everything on the computer and it prints it out for you in a nice, rigid, hard, durable plastic. It is a little sad that a lot of the old sculpting techniques are becoming less common, but 3D printing has brought the price down, has brought the hours behind all of these specialized parts. It's made it so much more convenient. So, you can't ignore that. So here is a picture from Where the Wild Things Are. As you can see, he does look a little like animation. He doesn't quite look like a practical puppet. Again, that was because, the footage required tweaking post being shot. So it's never going to look exactly how it was in the moment. But these were real puppets. These were crafted by a real artist, and an actual performer was inside of that. And in the video, they were talking about that Spike Jonze wanted real puppets so that the little boy character had something to act towards and something that felt more like a full universe for him when he was on set. And that really translates. The realism and the practicality of it is important and is an art that I don't think should be lost completely to digital media. So yeah, that is my entire presentation on puppetry. I think with the presence of Sesame Street and the Muppets, and specifically my generation's childhoods, there has been such an impact in the way that they have educated us with PBS, and how we were, in a sense, raised by these puppets, at least specifically the children who were utilizing the free public access media that was creative and in-depth and progressive. I don't know. I just think what Sesame Street did for my generation is unlike anything else I have seen. And I think puppets are so important. And I really, really hope that it is not completely lost to digital animation later on down the road. But yeah, thank you. That's my whole presentation.